guys, and welcome to this review of Star Wars Ahsoka. Maybe it's a limited series, maybe it's season 1, we'll get into that in just a bit. Either way, this is the Disney Plus show written entirely by Dave Filoni, set after the events of the first 3 seasons of The Mandalorian, where certain Imperials are now trying to find where Grand Admiral Thrawn went and bring him back. At the same time, Ahsoka and her friends of Rebels, or one-time Rebels, are also trying to figure out where Ezra is. Can they bring him back without also bringing Thrawn back? So, Star Wars Ahsoka, limited series or season 1, what did I think of it? I think this is a very good show. 8 episodes, a little unbalanced in terms of the pacing and momentum of it. There are some questionable moments here and there, but Star Wars is always going to be questionable moments. This is a very well made, very fun, very enjoyable, very emotional Star Wars show. In certain regards, it is very much season 5 of Star Wars Rebels, which means that if you haven't seen Star Wars Rebels, I don't know how much you're going to get out of this. If you haven't seen the Clone Wars, I don't know how much you're going to get out of this. This is a follow-up to those animated shows in every sense of the word, except it's now live action. And speaking of the live action parts of it, we'll get straight into that. We are now seeing live action depictions of animated characters for the first time, and it's pretty impressive. The casting is incredible across the board. Mary Elizabeth Winstead is great as Hera, a little different from the animated counterpart, but still very good. We're seeing a live action Sabine, she's fantastic. She looks the part, she sounds the part, she acts the part. Ezra, not going to go too much into his character in this show because that's part of the mystery of it, but Ezra is portrayed brilliantly. It looks like him, it sounds like him, they've got the blue contact lenses in there as well. He's fantastic. The one person who I'm like a little mixed about is Ahsoka herself, played by Rosario Dawson. I don't think it's a bad performance. She definitely looks like Ahsoka. My concern is that her demeanour and personality is so different now from when we first introduced to Ahsoka in the Clone Wars. Yes, she's older, yes, she's more mature, yes, she's seen things, she's done things, so of course she's going to be a different person. But I feel like between the events of Rebels and this, things have happened. There's a big time gap, and it's very unclear what exactly has happened. We know that her and Sabine had a master-apprentice sort of relationship, which has definitely impacted their relationship and has changed Ahsoka in certain regards. But I feel like we should have went a bit deeper in that, because Ahsoka in the show is very stoic, very dry, very humorless at times. There's not a huge amount of personality being exuded by her, and that's disappointing because Ahsoka has always exuded personality. There's a reason she was called Snips in Star Wars Clone Wars initially, and there's very little resemblance to that here. Again, not a bad performance, I just question how the character has went from one thing to what it is now. So maybe we'll get that answer someday, but right now it's a little unclear. Grand Admiral Thrawn, meanwhile, is a great character. One of my favourite Star Wars characters ever, right from when I first read him in the Thrawn trilogy. The problem is that Lars Mikkelsen doesn't look like Grand Admiral Thrawn. He looks like Lars Mikkelsen painted blue with a bad wig. And it grew on me the more I got to see him and the more I saw him, the more I accepted him as Grand Admiral Thrawn. But the thing is, we're so used to seeing Grand Admiral Thrawn as this tall, lean, muscular individual. Maybe not muscular, but like a fit individual. Lars Mikkelsen is, I presume, a 60-plus-year-old man with, you know, he looks good for his age, but he's clearly on the older side. He's clearly not in the best shape ever. And so it's odd to see Grand Admiral Thrawn now looking like that. And I do think maybe they could have went a bit further with certain prosthetics and stuff to try and make him look a bit more alien, a bit more like the animated version of the character. But otherwise, Lars Mikkelsen absolutely fantastic in terms of his performance and acting. He is the voice of Grand Admiral Thrawn in Rebels, and it carries that on here very, very well. It's just the visual side of it which I'm a bit more dubious about. But this is Star Wars at its most fantastical, at its most mystical. Dave Filoni's always explored that side of Star Wars in interesting ways with the Mortis gods and so on, which is touched upon a little bit here. We are getting the sense that we're going to go deeper into the Force at some point with this storytelling. We know that we're getting a movie that's going to wrap up this and the Mandalorian story arcs at some point. Presumably that's the next movie, but it's a little unclear. We also know that there's potential for another season of this to continue on. The way this show ends, I'm not going to go into spoilers, but the show ends in a way that there's clearly things being set up and there's not a huge amount of closure. How much of that is going to be in the movie? How much of that is going to be in the next season? How much of that is going to be in the next season of The Mandalorian, if any? We don't know. So that's one of the disappointments of this season, is that by the end of the show, we are a little unclear. Is this a limited series? Is this a mini series? Because if it is, there's not a huge amount of closure, and it begs the question of why. I want to spend a moment talking about just the visuals of this show. This was shot, certain times it looks like it's on location, certain times it's very clear it's on the volume, and I think this is the best looking show that's primarily shot on the volume so far. I think this is a very good looking Star Wars show. The sets, the costumes, the props, David Tennant's droid I think is very well done. In fact, David Tennant's performance I think is brilliant. He's now one of my favourite droids in all of Star Wars, I would say. He's the comedic relief here, but he's also a bit of a storyteller, providing some backstory and history, because, you know, that's what droids do. So yeah, great there. But in terms of the visuals, I think they've absolutely nailed the visuals of this show. It looks grounded, it looks believable. It is delving into the more fantastical, mystical side, but it's still very clearly Star Wars, and it's also still very clearly a TV show. And in a similar vein, I want to talk about the score. I don't know who done the score. I've got a feeling it's the same person that done the score in Rebels or the Clone Wars, because it's very Star Wars. It's much more Star Wars than some of the recent TV shows and movies have been, where the Mandalorians tried to veer more into like Western and try different things a bit. But this is very much someone doing a riff on John Williams, and I think they've done a very good job of it. I would suggest this person does the next Star Wars movie, the next Dave Filoni movie, and they probably will do, whoever it is. And yeah, but it does feel very Star Wars. It does have new orchestral grander themes based on some of the more animated themes, like Thrawn's theme has been boosted up a bit now because of that. And yeah, just a very good score across the board. There's a lot of fan service in this show. There's always fan service in Star Wars. This one, of course, being a continuation or sequel to Rebels and the Clone Wars, you get the idea of what sort of fan service there might be there, and there might be some hints at certain sequel events. Again, not going to go into spoilers. Chances are you already know some of the fan service at this point if you're reading this, watching this full review. But there are certain characters that appear, certain moments that are drawn upon, and certain things that are hinted at in the future. And I think this is very good fan service because it builds on the characters that are here as the focus, while also establishing things for the future and also harkening back to things of the past. It doesn't feel like these fan service elements are intrusive or distracting. It feels like they're showing up at relevant, important times, and they're there for a purpose. With maybe one exception in the final episode, which I think could have had a bit more development behind. So I want to touch upon some other villains in this. There's Baylan Skoll and his apprentice. They are rogue Jedi, mercenaries it seems. They're not quite Darkseid users, but they're not quite Jedi either. They survived the events of Order 66, at least Baylan Skoll did, and he's raised this new Jedi to be his apprentice. Baylan Skoll is played by the late great Ray Stevenson, may he rest in peace. It's a really good performance. Very nuanced, very detailed, there's clearly a lot of depth there. This is a character who's been places, who's seen things, who's done things. It's a character who's got a mission and a goal and a purpose. The problem is that we don't know any of that. And so often he is hinting at things, so often he is suggesting the things, and then because of the way this season ends, it's kind of just left hanging. We don't really know what his goal is yet, we don't know what his motivation is. So it's a shame that this is Ray Stevenson's final performance, because he's not going to be able to continue that, he's not going to see the results of it. Maybe even we won't, because Star Wars has a history of not recasting certain characters unless they're adjusting their ages and so on. There are ways that they can do it. Maybe they will just recast Ray Stevenson if they continue this story. I think they're probably going to have to, because it looks like it's going to be really significant. But yeah, very interested in this character. I think it's a great character. Just a bit disappointed that a lot of the things that were hinted at about this character, their history and what they are trying to do, didn't really come to fruition. But this is also an action show. There's a lot of good action scenes in there, a lot of good lightsaber combat moments in there. I don't think there's anything outstanding by necessary means. The final episode does have a good choreographed action scene between two characters. I'm not going to go into details on who those characters are. But one thing I will say is the lightsabers in this show are a bit questionable. And this harkens to The Mandalorian as well, where I think lightsabers are starting to feel a bit underpowered, because these are meant to be like all-powerful weapons, but they can deflect blaster bullets, they can cut through anything, and yet in this show there are multiple moments where the lightsaber just doesn't really do much. One character gets stabbed in the gut, something we've seen happen in Star Wars before, and yet this character survives, and they're absolutely fine, no repercussions at all, and it's a bit odd. Yeah. So I feel like we need to get back to lightsabers being this powerful, threatening weapon, rather than just another weapon that a character happens to have. And I think a lot of this underpowered feel is to do with the fact that lightsabers are now a practical thing. In the past they were essentially sticks that had CGI applied to make them look cooler or whatever. In the original trilogy they were very heavy, so the characters were struggling to swing them around. In the prequels they were very light and they were able to just swing them all over the place. But CGI was always used to emit the blade and the colour and so on. Now though, they're an all-in-one effect in that they are self-lighting, they are essentially just big bats. And I think that limits what can actually be done with the lightsabers, because you can't do so much with that CGI anymore. You've actually got to change the item, the weapon or whatever. There's a lot of things you've got to do to make it look good now. And yeah, it does look more practical, it looks more physical. It means the actors can actually hold a real lightsaber, sort of, and see what it can do. But it also just seems less threatening at the same time. It's a weird one. But this is a Dave Filoni show. Again, it continues off from Rebels. Dave Filoni, he just gets it. He knows what Star Wars is. He knows how to do the more mystical side of things. He knows how to draw on the power of the Force. He does a good job of making the Force seem powerful, impressive and amazing. At the same time, there's room for like cute animals and creatures and some humour and charm in there. There's room for the more serious, dramatic storytelling as well. He brings back some fan service moments. Hayden Christensen's back as Anakin Skywalker. We all know that at this point. I think this is one of Hayden Christensen's best performances as Anakin Skywalker. Of course, his performances in the prequel trilogy are what they are. He was young, he had George Lucas as director. There's a lot of things that go into what that performance is. But here, he's older, he's more mature, he's clearly honed in on the character more. He's got a good director behind him. This is Hayden Christensen really just nailing Anakin Skywalker as a character, and it helps that we've had this character developed fully now over the events of the Clone Wars, and to see him in Clone Wars armor and stuff is really cool as well. There are some questions about how he reappears in this show, particularly the first time he reappears. How does he end up there? How is he exactly interacting with certain characters in that regard? I don't know. It's a bit vague. So yeah, I do have questions there. I do think that brings up some canonical issues. Is he actually physically there? Is he some sort of vision, a dream, or is something else? Who knows? But again, it's a little vague. That is, I think, the best episode of this season, the one that he initially reappears in, but it does leave me with more questions than it does answers. But overall, Star Wars Ahsoka, whether it's a limited series or season 1, very fun, very enjoyable, very good, very well made. I think it is one of the best Star Wars shows we've had, next to Star Wars Andor and Mandalorian Season 2. I think this is pure Star Wars as well. Andor is the very serious, darker Star Wars, grounded Star Wars. Mando is the more pulpy, adventurous Star Wars. This is the more fantastical Star Wars, and it shows just how much Star Wars can be. It's very, very good, very, very well done. And that's my review. If you want to check out more content like this, subscribe to my channel. Check out some of the things I wrote on thegamer.com as well, where I write about Star Wars and video games. Follow me on Twitter, X, Instagram and so on at _Grant Burton. And until next time, thanks for watching.